Hello, everyone. My name is Maggie Rutherford. I'm a second year student in the college. I'm an event coordinator in the economics career office, and I work with a team of 3 other staff and our director, Jen Jones, who's on the line. We're so excited to be hosting today's How I Got This Job Federal Commercial Technology Consulting with Syeda Mahbub. This is a special program because while a student here, Syeda was in the role that I'm in today. Thank you, Syeda, for coming back and spending time with us. Much of what we do today is because of the work that you did with ECO. Today, we want to hear from Syeda literally how you got your job, how you got into your field, and what you did at UVA to get there. We want to know how you approached your internship and job searches, applications, and interviews, and then how you landed your job with Accenture and then moved to Deloitte. If that sounds good, I think we're ready to get started. So I'll switch it over to Jen to start the Q&A.
Okay, great. Maggie, thank you so much. Again, Syeda, it's really exciting to have you here. As you know, you and I have been in touch through the years, so there really hasn't been so much time that we have not spoken, and it's exciting to have you here with our students now. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so excited to make a full 180. As Maggie mentioned, I used to work for the ECO, so it'll always have a special place in my heart.
Well, this is Syeda when she was here. She's in the front row. I don't know if everyone can see that. She's wearing a dress, and there also is a video online on our YouTube station, on our YouTube channel, where Syeda is talking about one of our programs. She was interviewed, and it's a wonderful publicity piece for us that we use each year. You all will see that in February when we start launching the 2022 Career Forum. Okay, I'm going to pull it off the screen. Thanks for letting me embarrass you and brag about you, Syeda. So, Syeda, I actually think that the first event that you attended that was outside of UVA, and we haven't done a lot of programming outside of UVA, was up in DC, right? You came to that networking event with our alumni? Was it in Arlington, I think?
It was in DC. I think it was at Lincoln or something like that. But I remember that seems like forever ago, pre-COVID.
Yeah, and it was a great event, and that's similar to what the forum is like, where we're going to have alumni and students actually in person. We're really hopeful for that. Okay, so today we're going to really try to do a deep dive into Syeda's experience in the job search and interviewing process. And I was fortunate enough that I got to hear a lot about her process while she was going through it because we worked so closely together. So I know that Syeda is going to be pretty candid with you all. This isn't an overview of the consulting industry. Okay, so for more information about consulting in general, we're going to put up some resources. There'll be an intro to consulting in the spring. We had the intro to consulting just a few weeks ago with the UVA Career Center. But so Syeda will talk a little bit about that, but really this is that deep dive into what her experience was. And we will find out about what her job is, what it entails. So let's get started, turning it over to you. Could you start by telling us a little bit about your experience at UVA, what you did while you were here, organizations that you were involved with?
Yeah, thank you. So while I was at UVA, a lot of my focus was working as well. I always had different jobs going out through the years. I used to work in the office of the Dean of Students as an event coordinator, and then I started working with Jen at the economics career office. And I could talk a lot about that. I have a lot of the successes that I've had and my interview process and all of that. I definitely owe it to Jen and the ECO. So she's a great resource, and so is the ECO. But some other things that I did, I volunteered with Cash through Madison House. That was really helpful and I think developmental for me. There was a lot of great experiences that I could talk about from that in my interviews. And then I also studied abroad for a semester when I was at school, and that also gave me a lot of things to talk about. And it was very genuine too. I wasn't, making anything up when I used to talk about it, my experiences and during my interviews. So it definitely made it easy and more free-flowing conversation. Whether someone at the firm that I was applying to also worked with Cash, or also studied abroad, it definitely helped with conversation. So I think that kind of wraps up like my time at UVA, and then I had an internship before my 3rd and 4th semester, which I can talk to as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. So you, when you interned in between your third and fourth year, where did you intern, and had that been your planned internship? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I interned at a firm in New York City called AlphaSites. And it wasn't a consulting firm, but my clients were consulting firms. It was more at a high level, it was connecting experts with firms that had questions that they want to answer. And basically what AlphaSites does is facilitate that connection. I wasn't aiming for that. I was pretty much just applying to a lot of internships at that point in my after third year, or in that summer, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I didn't know exactly what internship I wanted. This internship seemed pretty broad and kind of exposed me to different things. And I learned through that internship that I wanted to be doing what my clients were doing, what the consultants that I was working with were doing. So that kind of opened up my eyes to consulting, because I didn't really know what it was before. Consulting is a very broad term, so it's hard to understand sometimes, but that's kind of what opened my eyes into wanting to explore consulting as a full-time job.
Okay, great. Thank you. So you came back after your summer internship and you were thinking you wanted to explore consulting. So how did you land at Accenture?
Yeah, so I guess prior to that internship, I'll preface that I knew I wanted to get into some sort of business field or business industry, but I did not know exactly what. So I went to a lot of career workshops and career events that either the ECO was holding, that the career office was holding, that the comm school, engineer. I kind of went everywhere. And I would go to like finance-oriented workshops, investment banking, audit, tax, industry, kind of everything. And then I kind of landed on AlphaSites and then through AlphaSites Consulting. Fast forward to when I was looking for full-time jobs, I kind of narrowed it down to consulting, but within consulting, there's a lot too. So I think what helped me is, instead of just applying to every consulting firm out there in every industry, I kind of wanted to narrow it down a little bit, both for like my own interests, but then also being able to tackle all of the applications, all of the networking. You kind of have to narrow it down a little bit, kind of for your own sanity as well, because it's overwhelming, of course. So I started to, I guess, early in the school year or late in the summer before my fourth year had started, I figured out federal consulting. I didn't really know it was a thing. I just thought consulting was consulting and you just worked for whoever, but there's specific companies, and at bigger firms, there's specific arms that focus on federal consulting. And I really just resonated with it more than commercial consulting. I thought, obviously the missions of federal and state and local agencies are different than those of commercial companies. And I really resonated with the mission there. And I wanted to work for I wanted to work for clients that contribute to all of us day to day, the stuff that we do. So I narrowed my search into federal consulting only. So I would only look into federal consulting firms. And then the bigger consulting firms will have separate interviews for federal versus commercial. So that kind of helped me be a little bit less overwhelmed. I was still very overwhelmed, but a little bit less. And then how I landed at Accenture, I interviewed and, applied to a bunch of different places. Accenture for me, I had the best experience with them during the interview process. And of course, their offer was the best for me. So that's how I landed at Accenture.
So as you went through the interview process, you were interviewing with different firms, researching the firms. How did you find out more? You said you went to information session. Did you talk to alumni? And if so, how did you do that?
Yeah, I think networking was how I got the job, to be honest. I didn't have a high GPA. I think it was below a 3.5, maybe around 3.3, 3.4. So, pretty average GPA. If I knew that wasn't going to be my standing point. I had a good internship, and I could talk a lot about what I learned from it. But I think what really helped me was networking. So I started interviewing for jobs maybe early September, and I had my offer that I accepted early October. So those I guess 1 to 1.5 months were really, really intense. I was networking all the time. how I would do that, I guess one strategy was I went to a lot of career events. And I know that looks a little bit differently nowadays, but still, I know that the career office is still holding a lot, whether it be person or virtual. And then I would try to actually have like meaningful conversations with one person. I wouldn't jump from this person to this person to this person because they're not going to remember me that way. So, I would kind of go around the room, see someone that I feel like I could talk to that was approachable and actually have a conversation with them. And then after each of the workshops or events, I would email them, and I would always make sure that I added a little bit of a personal tidbit because I'm sure they would be getting a lot of emails saying, "Oh, so great to meet you today." But if you can kind of pick on something that they might remember, then that'll really make you stand out. I remember there was a recruiter at Accenture actually. I had seen her in September and we talked a lot. And then I'd seen her maybe like 3 weeks later and she got a haircut and I just quickly commented on it. And then she remembered me that way. She's like, wow, you actually remembered. So little things here and there. It doesn't have to be anything like monumental, just making a little bit of a personal connection so it seems genuine. And that way you can kind of refer to it in your follow-up email. So that's how I learned a lot more. I didn't cold call anybody. I always made sure before I get on the phone, I actually had some sort of conversation with them beforehand. So from these events, turn them into, conversational emails. And then if I wanted to know a little bit more, connect with them, I would do like a 10, 15-minute chat over the phone.
Okay, so that's interesting. Let me make sure I understand. So you didn't reach out, let's say through LinkedIn. You met people at other networking events like this, perhaps, or information sessions, and then followed up with them. Is that right?
Yeah, I didn't cold call anyone through LinkedIn or anything like that.
So does anybody reach out to you now through LinkedIn or through other networks? And if so, how do you manage that? How do you feel about that? Is it okay for you? Can you talk about that with us?
Yeah, I guess the reason I didn't do that was because there were just so many events on campus that were in person. And I personally, I think I shine better in person. But I'm totally understanding that we're in a different world now. So I have students reaching out to me all the time in LinkedIn, and I approach it the same way I would approach the folks that I talked to years ago that I had met in person. So it's definitely, I should receive it the same, and I'm totally understanding that it's a different world now. And I guess when reaching out in LinkedIn, just making sure it doesn't sound like it was a copy and paste. At the end of the day, we're all still human, and I am on the other side now, but I still, want to make it I still want to feel genuine in our conversation. So, a very short message of like, oh, I saw this on your LinkedIn. I do this at UVA, or, I studied abroad here, or I do cash, or what have you. Just pick on something that makes it a little bit more personal. And I think it'll resonate more with the folks that you're kind of cold calling on LinkedIn. But I think it's totally fine to do that, especially in the world that we live in now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about your job. Your first job with Accenture. What is it that you did when you went in as a consultant? What was the work?
Yeah, so I was a business technology analyst, and kind of how that's different from management consulting is you're working, hands-on with technology, whereas a management consultant, all jobs are kind of peripherally connected to technology nowadays, right? There's very little projects where you're not working with technology, but management consultants work more on, there's a change coming in. How do we manage and make sure everyone's comfortable with the change? My job was actually helping implement that technology. So when I first joined Accenture, or when I was applying, I had always checked like management consulting because I did not have a tech background. I think I took like 1 or 2 computer science classes and just like, it wasn't for me. So when I got my offer at Accenture and I accepted, the recruiter said, well, we really need technology analysts over management consultants right now. Are you interested in that? And I said, sure, but I hope you know who you're hiring because I know nothing about technology. And she said, no, that's okay. You will learn everything on the job. And she was very right. I learned everything that I needed to know on the job. You just have to have an interest in wanting to learn about technology, right? You can't be resistant. So I think if that is ever offered to you, and that's not typically the route you're going on, I encourage you to explore it, unless it's something you really, really don't want to do. But you'll learn everything on the job. So no anxieties there. when I first joined Accenture, the first month or so, they kind of put us in this technology boot camp to learn a software called Salesforce, which you guys might have heard or use in your activities, but basically learned about Salesforce for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And then I started getting staffed on projects where I helped implement Salesforce technology to government clients. So that was my first role.
And who would some of those clients be? Can you share that with us? If not, maybe it's fine.
Yeah, no. So again, I work in federal consulting strictly. So all of my clients are either federal agents, defense agencies, or local and state. So I've worked for the Navy, and then I've worked for USPS. Currently, where I work now, I work for the FDA, and then I've worked for some other security agencies that I can't name, but all federal, local, state clients.
Okay. And when you're working with those agencies, who are your contacts within the organizations? How do you manage that between Accenture, or now Deloitte, and the agency you're staffed on?
So who are the clients I work for? Like, how do I communicate with them? Basically?
Yeah. How do you communicate with them? Are you staffed on a team of people from Accenture with, let's say, the FDA? Well, now that's Deloitte, but or are you the primary point of contact for the organization?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It all depends on the scale of your team and the scale of your project. I've been on very small teams where there's 4 of us on the right now the Deloitte side, and then I've been on projects at Accenture where my team is 25 people. So when you start out, you probably won't get as much face-to-face with your client. So you usually do a lot of the implementation work as a junior analyst, and by implementation work, I mean actually helping your development team, create the application, and then the managers and senior managers on your project are the main points of contact between the company you work for and the client. As you go up, as you rise up from analyst to future positions, you will have direct face-to-face with your client if that's something you show interest in, of course.
Okay, great. So can you talk a little bit about the Accenture interview process, what that was like for you, behavioral interview, were there cases, and how did you prepare?
Yeah, so preparation was definitely key. And I say that with not just prepping for case interviews, but also kind of building your confidence in how you present yourself, I think is very important. I think for consulting firms, sometimes they're looking for specific skills. If you are going into more of like a software engineering role, they're probably looking at some hard tech skills. But if you're applying to general tech or management consulting, there's not one specific skill set that they're looking at besides the fact that you can communicate well and you have critical thinking skills, right? So those really take practice through running through interviews with your friends and practicing case interviews as well. So with federal consulting, my interviews, all of them did have case interviews, but they weren't similar to some of the commercial cases, whereas some of the commercial cases, they'll ask you like, how many baseball bats were there in 2010 or something? I don't know, I just made that up. But like very just like they are trying to test your critical thinking skills, and then a little bit maybe more technical. For the federal consulting case interviews, they would present you a case, a very generic high level case, such as, this federal agency is looking to replace their old outdated processes with some new automated technology. And they'll give you details on that. And basically you are to say, like, how would you help them transition into that? And I think a lot of the ways that I divided all of my case interviews with federal is starting off with people, process, and technology, and kind of dividing my thoughts that way. You can use whatever helps you, but you do need to have a way to kind of organize your thoughts during a case, because otherwise it can get scattered. And I've had very scattered case interviews, so I've learned from that. So you just need a really good way to organize your thoughts and put a framework behind your thoughts, because there's no real right answer. They just want to be able to see that you are able to communicate well and you're critically thinking about the issue that they presented. So for behavioral, you need to have a list of common questions that most firms ask. And, you know, you can find them. I'm sure career offices will offer that. You can find them online, Glassdoor. Have a document of those questions and answer them with specific examples, very specific examples, not very broad. And then practice them with your friends or Jen. I'm offering you up, sorry. Or, you know, anyone that you can find that will listen to you and provide you critical feedback. And for cases, same thing. I read Victor Chang's book. I forget what it was called, Case in Point, I think, or something like that.
That was Case Interview Secrets. Yeah, Victor, Case in Point is Mark Cosentino. But both of those, yeah, I think those would be the Bibles of case interview process. Yeah.
Sure. Easy reads. Just go ahead and read that. You'll learn some tips and tricks, but I think the practice will really come in when you're practicing with your friends, because practicing with your friends are also going through the interview process, right? That understand kind of what's at stake. Make them give you critical feedback and provide it to them as well. That's how I practice. I probably did, for that month or and a half that I was interviewing before I got the offer that I accepted, I probably prepped 3-4 hours a week, maybe, with my friends.
Okay, great. In the eco orientation, I tend to recommend that students think about the job search process as another class. So they are scheduling that much time aside each week in order to prep for applications. So that sounds about right. All right, so we're not going to go into our Q&A formally yet, but does anyone have questions about what we've covered so far for Syeda? And what I'd like you to do in asking your questions, because this is also practice for all of our students, is turning on your mic and your camera if it's not already on, sharing your name and what year you are, and then launching into your question for Syeda. Or you can send a question in the chat directly to me. So anything on what we've covered so far? Just more clarification. Okay. All right, so we're going to continue. So let's back up just a little bit. You talked about how you're, networking. You think that you gave that a lot of weight in your application process. Can you talk a little bit about resumes though, how you organize your resume, what Accenture seemed to be looking for on a resume? What's important for you to see on a resume today?
Yeah, so I guess resume is like the first step in everything, right? That's the first thing they probably will look at. It's obviously great if they have the ability to put a face to the name, and that's why I went on so many events, is because I didn't just want someone to see my resume and that's it. I kind of wanted them to be able to like picture who I was, because we've had conversations, we've had phone conversations or email back and forth. With that said, your resume should be very clean and easy to read. If it's messy, I can guarantee you no one's going to look at it and they're just going to put it away. So you have to make sure it's very organized and easy to read. I'm happy to, I think I still have the resumes that I submitted, so I'm happy to send those out if that would be helpful. But starting off with, your education, what year you're graduating. I'm trying to think about if I put my GPA on there. I think I did, because if you don't, I think they'll think that you have, a 0.1 or something. So, and again, GPA is not the most important, right? I didn't get my job because my GPA was super stellar. It was because of other reasons. So put that on there. They'll glance at it. They're not going to put too much weight into it. And then go into some skills that you've learned from your classes and any internships or jobs that you've had. And then focus on your work and leadership experience. I remember it was a woman from Deloitte actually during my interview process said to kind of quantify as much as possible. So if you worked at this, at this internship over the summer and you worked on dashboards of some sort for your leaders, like if you can put that I worked on 10 dashboards over the course of 2 months and to provide this and that, that really helps your resume stand out, because you're not just saying what you did, but how much of it you did and what impact it made. And then also just, sometimes internships might not be the most glamorous, or it doesn't even have to be an internship, a job you had over the summer. You can always make it sound interesting based on what you learned. And then it's also important from those internships or those jobs, what you didn't like about it and what you're seeking at the firm that you're applying to. So it's not just, okay, I learned this, but then I also learned that I didn't like doing this. So this is why I'm interested in your firm because of X, Y, and Z. I spoke to that about Alpha Sites. I had a good experience, but I didn't want to pursue it after graduation because of X, Y, and Z. And I want to work at, your firm because it offers this. So very clean resume. It's the first thing they're going to look at, and just make sure that each of your bullet points have, if possible, have some sort of like number or deliverable to back it up, and then also end it with the impact that you made by doing that action.
Thank you. It'd be great to get a copy of your resume to share with students. Syeda, did anyone ask you why you weren't going back to Alpha Sites? Did that come up? Or did they ask you if you got a return offer?
Oh, frequently. They would say, they would look at the resume and say, oh, I've seen you worked at this firm called Alpha Sites. Why aren't you returning there? Quite frequently, they would say that. And, I had very genuine answers. I did have I can't even remember if I had a return offer at this point. I don't know, Ted, do you remember?
I think you did.
Okay.
And I think that was something really to be prepared for, and that our students should be prepared for too. Because if you weren't given a return offer, right, you want to be prepared for answering that question. It may be that the firm doesn't give return offers, right? But just be ready to be asked that so it doesn't shake you when you're in the interview. Okay, great, thank you. So moving forward, so we talked about interviews, we talked about resumes. Were there any assessments or testing that went on for you for Accenture?
Prior to the offer?
Yeah, prior to the offer, did they give you any kind of personality assessment? Now, many of our students are being given a Pi metrics assessment. These, third-party firms are outsourced to run those assessments. Did you have anything like that?
I don't think I had it for Accenture,
Okay.
but I do remember a couple of other firms doing just like a very welcome screening. I don't know if it really had a lot to do with like your ability to get an offer, but I think they were just trying to understand a little bit more about you, but not for Accenture.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm going to just ask one more question and we're going to open to the students. Could you talk with us a little bit about your transition to Deloitte and what went into that for you? Mm-hmm.
Sure. So, long story short, they're both very similar companies. They have kind of the same mission. I'm working for the same types of clients. I did Salesforce work at Accenture, doing Salesforce work now. So my role really didn't change. But I think the reason I had transitioned, and I wouldn't say I regretted, but I didn't have all of the information in front of me when I did. The project that I was on, I did not like the current project I was on when I was at Accenture for multiple reasons. I was on a travel project, and that's another thing. With federal consulting, you typically don't travel because most of your clients are in DC. If you're going to be working in federal consulting, most of the jobs are in DC. So I would assume that you have, maybe some aspirations to move to DC, and now everything's virtual, so that doesn't matter. But for Accenture, I got put on like one of the very few federal consulting travel projects. And I thought I would love it, and I did not. And for different reasons, some people love it, some people don't. And I was kind of put out there on my own, and I just didn't like the project I was on, and I felt like I wasn't being heard. The beauty of consulting is that you don't have to leave the firm to do something new. You can just look for a new project as long as everyone's supportive. But I think I was kind of hitting a wall at that point, and I knew that my skills were transferable, and I knew I still wanted to do consulting, technology consulting. So I got a very similar job at Deloitte, and I am happier, but that's not to say that Deloitte is very different from Accenture or all the other different bigger firms like EY, the PwC, and KPMG, and all of that. So I think that's a lesson learned for me. You don't need to be switching jobs in a big firm to get a new role or try something new. You can network your way into something new within the firm without doing the whole transition. At the end of the day, I'm very happy where I am now, but I wish someone had told me that when I was making the switch.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. it is very difficult, I think, also for many of the large consulting firms, the federal consulting firms anyway, to get a sense of what's different in the culture between the firms, until you're in them also. So
Right.
yeah. Okay, great. So I want to open this up to our students. I have a whole slate of questions, but it would be nice if anyone has questions. This is the opportunity for you to jump in here, and let's just get things started by everybody entering in the chat. So everyone on the line, could you enter the chat your name, not your name, sorry, your year and your major. And if you're undeclared, go ahead and tell us you're undeclared. So entering in the chat now. So Syeda has an opportunity to see who we've got on the line. So your year and your major. Okay, so we do have some diversity here. Second year undeclared, econ, second year econ, third engineering. We did open this up to engineering because we also had engineering econ majors who couldn't get in if we didn't open up to them. CS, third year, second year pre-com econ CS, and then some more fourth year econs. Okay, great. All right, well, let's keep this interactivity going, and let's get a couple questions for Syeda. You can either unmute or you can send your question in the chat.
You can ask me anything. I'll be candid.
Okay, I have a question. So I'm Tasneem. I'm a third year studying econ. So when you said that when you were at Accenture, you were placed on one of the very few travel cases. So does that mean that you don't have much discretion in choosing what kind of cases you work for or work on?
That's a great question. When you're starting out, like your first or second role, you kind of get placed, unless you have, a bunch of different managers coming at you wanting to staff you on their project, then you obviously have a little bit more of a choice, but that's likely not going to happen because you're just joining. There's not a lot of people that know you at the firm to know that you would be really good at this project and this manager wants you on this one. So I would say like the first or second role, you kind of get placed. But I thought I actually wanted to go on that travel project. So that's why I actually sought it out. It was my third role at Accenture. But the first or second one, you do get placed just because nobody knows you yet. It's hard for folks to be like competing for you basically, right? I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Other questions?
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm a third year studying chemical engineering. I was just wondering, when you're staffed on projects that you have almost not a lot of knowledge in, are you able to seek out resources? And do you feel like there are enough resources to prepare you for all of your projects?
Yeah, that's a great question. Every time I get on a new project, whether it's a new client or I've been working for the FDA for the last 2 years, but every project I'm on is different and every technology is different. So you're always learning something new. I definitely feel like once I join the project, obviously it's a little overwhelming when you first join anything new, but your team is really there to help you out. It benefits them to share as much knowledge as they can for you to contribute back to the team. There's usually an onboarding process that your team will set up for you when you join new projects. You'll learn the core consulting skills and you'll evolve them over time. And when you first join a firm, whether it be a big firm or a small firm, there's always going to be some sort of onboarding where they teach you, the way that firm does things, and then also just core consulting skills. But then within the project, there's obviously content you need to learn. On my current one, I had to learn about this new technology that the FDA uses, but I'm never anxious that I'm not going to know enough because my team is always there to help me and it benefits them to do so. And there's plenty of resources within the firm as well that I can reach out to, whether it be like actual documents or actual experts in the field that are at the firm. So I don't ever feel like I'm not going to get what I need to help me get set up well.
Thank you.
No problem.
I have a quick question about Salesforce. So Salesforce, you had some exposure to Salesforce in this office with the ECO. and limited. But I'm curious, if students are applying now for a business technology role with your any of the federal firms, would it be beneficial for them to be familiar with Salesforce? And if so, and what other software might be useful to have on their resume to really have even just a little bit of exposure so that they are interviewed, to increase their competitiveness?
Yeah. So I did not know any of this when I was applying. So, and I think it was also a different time. Technology is ever so growing. So it's in more demand than it even was when I was applying. It definitely doesn't hurt to understand some of the technology that's really hot today. And Salesforce is just one of many. Salesforce is like a leading customer relationship management tool out there, but there's a lot. So maybe read up on, read up on some tech newsletters. I wouldn't say you need to know the back end of Salesforce, but if you know Salesforce and the technology ecosystem and where it fits in, kind of from like a news perspective, I think that would be very impressive, because no one's going to expect, a new grad to know how to build something in Salesforce. If you do, that's amazing, but it's not expected. But if you know how to talk about technology and you have an interest in it, and you're able to pull something in your interview like, oh, I read in this Bloomberg article that Salesforce is competitive in this field because of X, Y, and Z, I think that's really impressive. And then it also depends on what you're interested in. If you're interested in like data visualization, maybe it's really interesting for you to learn tools like Tableau, which Salesforce now owns. So hone in on what you're interested in. If something like Salesforce doesn't interest you, I wouldn't bring it up in an interview, because someone's gonna attach you to that and put you in a Salesforce role if you get that job, right? So there's so many technologies out there that you can pick and choose, but I think learning how all these different technologies fit into the technology ecosystem, and then maybe even specifically the technology government ecosystem, and you're able to talk about it like on an intellectual, conversational level, I think that's really impressive. And if you have time and you want to and you're interested in it, it doesn't hurt to get a certification either, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's expected.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm just going to piggyback on that real quick to remind our students about their Coursera courses. So you all have access to Coursera, where you could take Tableau. There probably isn't a program in Salesforce that's not pretty involved, but you could do Tableau, R, Python, any of these technical skills, just at the very fundamental level of knowledge, as Syeda is discussing, and even working on a project on your own, right? I have students who work on projects for the ECO. They volunteer, they want to get a project experience on their resume, and so they'll approach me and say, can I work on this? And I mean, most of the time I'm going to say yes, because I also want them to get experience, so that they can speak about that, on their resume first, and then of course in interviews. Okay, great. And there is
just a plug for Salesforce. And I know a lot of other similar softwares do this as well. I think ServiceNow, Oracle, and stuff like that. For Salesforce, there's this thing called Trailhead, which you can just go online, and it's free, and you can kind of go through a learning course and it's not going to teach you maybe like the hard skills of how to develop, unless you want to. There's Trailheads in that, but you can it's like a self-guided learning course, and a lot of people put that on their resume. Even folks that are experienced hires, they'll link their Trailhead account or something to show that they have this certificate, or they took this course. So just wanted to put that out there for anyone that's interested in Salesforce. I can talk about that as well. And I know a lot of other softwares have that as well.
And they also are hiring now, Salesforce, and they bought Tableau, and also they own Slack. So that some of you are probably familiar with Slack. And I think they have their boot camp for UVA students this Saturday. All right, so that's something that we can talk more about. Syeda, can you share with us some job opportunities with Deloitte that you know about now that might be interesting to our students?
Yeah, so I have some of the resume deadlines outlined here. So for those if you're a fourth year looking for a full-time role or an analyst, I think the resume drop is on the 19th is what I have. And so that's 2 days from now. And then interviews, if you're selected, will take place round 1 will be on October 4th. Round 2 will be October 6th. And then for those that are looking for an internship, Deloitte offers, the role is called Summer Scholars. The resume drop for that is October 3rd is what I have from the recruiting team. And then Round 1 interviews is October 18th with round 2 on October 20th, and you'll receive your offers pretty closely after those round 2 interviews.
See how clever we are? We had our conversation today with Syeda 2 days before the resumes were due. That is intentional. Okay, great. So we've got, oh, great. What's a resume drop? Thank you for that question. Syeda, you want to field that?
Yeah, so a resume drop is when you apply to a job and you provide your resume. So I think it's still through Handshake. I think you all are still using Handshake, right?
Yes.
So yeah, just dropping your resume in there. I'm not even sure if it prompts you to add a cover letter. If it does, I would do it.